Welcome to the Ohms Property Podcast, your go-to guide for navigating the world of property investing. I am your host, and in every episode, I sit down with property investors, developers, and top industry experts to share their insights, strategies, and inspiring stories. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just getting started, join us as we explore all aspects of building wealth through property. Welcome to another episode of the Ohms Property Podcast. Today, I'm privileged to be joined with Jazz. Jazz is the founder of the Kent Property Meet. And I'm going to dive into a really inspiring conversation about how he got started in property. And we're also going to talk briefly about what a wonderful event the Kent Property Meet puts on. Jazz, thank you so much for coming along. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, very well. Thank you, Omar. Been a pleasure to be here.
Bit of a journey to get you to come from Medway.
No, it hasn't been bad, actually. Do you know,
Okay.
like the good thing about where we are is that from Kent to London, it brings a different vibe.
It does.
You know, and it's nice to step out of your day-to-day just to come out and experience something
Absolutely.
a bit different.
Yeah, and I'm privileged to have you here, so thank you so much. You are very highly regarded in the Medway area as a chap who does big things and has been doing this for a prolonged period of time. And excuse my French, but a bit of a no bullshit guy. You say it as it is, which is something I'm trying to think back, actually. I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second, but the first time I met you at the Kent Property Meet, I came along and just sat there as a sort of naive, let me see what this is all about. I've been to a few networking events, and a lot of the ones I've been to have sort of, you're sitting there and you feel like you're being sold to. It's like, is this person up the front trying to get me to buy a course? What's in it for them? You feel like you're being sold. And I remember the first time I saw you speak at the Kent Property Meet, and I just thought, this guy is an absolute legend. Like his intentions are nothing but genuine to connect people in a room because he's passionate about something. Yeah. And that was why I was so sort of like drawn into, I don't think apart from a holiday, I don't think I've ever missed a meet since. And it's something that is just like, that's me, I'm there. And it's a commitment to come to it, but it's really been powerful for me, the connections and people I've met. So on that note, and we'll come back to the Kent Property Meet, but if you could just introduce yourself, give me a bit of an overview of like who you are, your background, perhaps, any businesses or how you started in property, that sort of stuff, if you can. Yeah,
well, look, you've done a fantastic job of introducing me anyway, so thank you for that. Really appreciate that. But where I'm at the moment is, I'm a full-time property investor. I've had other business interests in the past. My background when I left university was I went straight into the pub trade, and that's sort of where I grew into sort of form my the next step of going into property because, as you know, I don't know if you know this, but in the pub trade we had the smoking ban, we had the financial crisis back in 2008, and there was just so much going on at that time, and I was young. I just finished university at that point, and my business partner, he was 13 years older than me, so he was like my mentor. I didn't know what a mentor was back then, I'd left university, I was working for this pub company, and the individual in question, he was the biggest independent landlord in the UK. So he had just literally hit 101 pubs, and then it just all went to pot. Literally overnight, the business went to administration. And at that point, we had the business development manager of the brewery who was saying, guys, I don't know what your future holds. And I'd just come out of university doing a business and marketing degree, so I was this sprightly 21-year-old guy, and I was thinking, there's an opportunity here, hang on a minute, Yeah. And the pub was fantastic. It was on the banks of the River Medway. We had like a nightclub underneath. There was a bar on the first floor with a pool table, restaurant area, fully kitted out kitchen. And then we had accommodation upstairs where my partner used to live. My business partner used to live.
Yeah.
And we had this fantastic beer garden out the front with benches and benches with the River Medway there. Next door, we had the headquarters of our local authority. So we always had like a lunchtime trade coming in. But we really needed some investment in that place. So what did I do? I was the assistant manager there.
When was this, Jazz?
This was in 2001.
Right,
So I literally just coming to the end of my degree.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what I had at that point. My intentions were to join the police force. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was an army cadet as a young man. So I went from like combined cadet force, and then I thought, I'll maybe join the army. I thought that was a bit rough,
Yeah.
you know? So I thought I'd join the police force. And I went to Middlesex University, so it was next to the Peel Training Centre, because the idea was go to university here, join the Peel Training Centre and join the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
But then I had the opportunity in the pub trade to be a businessman, and that's what I always wanted to do, was start my own business. So anyway, I put a business plan together literally in about 3 days. We went over to our local bank, which was in view from the pub, and the bank manager had a relationship with my dad, and that's where I got a lot of my inspirations from. Omar, you know, is like growing up in the family business. You know, we're seeing my dad do all the hustle and sort of, you know, working 2 jobs and never quitting. And the bank manager basically funded us up to 50% of the finance, and my dad filled in the other 50%, and that was it. The rest is all history.
Wow.
And basically how I ended up in property was after the smoking ban and the financial crisis, the business just sort of, the turnover just dropped. And we're a wet-led pub, so we were selling mainly drinks, you know, beer, soft drinks, bitter. We didn't really move over to not the restaurant operation as quick as we should have. And it's a good 75% of our customers were the army barracks, which are located behind the pub location. But then at that time we had a few tours. So we had Iraq War, we had Afghanistan, and you know, our customers had left because they're the army, you know, the Royal Engineers. And they were there building back the bridges and the infrastructure in the countries, protecting the infrastructure as well. So, you know, we've had 70% of our customers disappear. We've had 30% of our turnover knocked down. And if you're only working on 62% gross margins, well, you're left with hardly anything net.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to introduce a sponsor of the channel. Trinity Finance is a directly authorised FCA regulated mortgage brokerage. Founded in 2015 with over 30 mortgage brokers, we're really well placed to help you with all your property finance needs. Starting with first-time buyers and those moving home, we also help people remortgaging residential and buy-to-let property. Alongside that, we specialise in ground-up development, commercial lending, HMO funding, mezzanine, auction, and also your traditional buy-to-let. If that's of interest, get in contact with us via email at info@trinityfinance.co.uk, or you can give us a ring on 01322 907 000, and we look forward to hearing from you.
So the smoking ban is an interesting one, and I don't think it gets spoken about enough, actually. So my family used to be in the dry cleaning business.
Yeah.
And what's quite interesting is how that smoking ban affected so many different businesses. Because if you think about, say, for dry cleaning, the norm in our business was people would buy suits, typically that were long lasting. They wouldn't be these disposable, machine washable suits.
Yeah.
They'd buy them, they'd store them at home, and then work in the city, for example, and on a Friday night, they'd go out to a pub. Their suits would smell of smoke because people were smoking inside. And then they'd bring them to us on a Saturday, and we would dry clean their suits and look after them and give them back to them. And when the smoking ban came in, I remember vividly as a young chap working, helping mum and dad in the shop, pressing jackets. I probably shouldn't have been doing that at the age, but you know what it's like. You chip in and help in the family business. I remember mum and dad kind of having sleepless nights about it at the time, because it was sort of, we knew that people brought their dry cleaning in because they needed to get it cleaned. The smoking ban was an issue, and slowly that business became very much unviable, because it's like, you know, you buy a suit from M&S or somewhere for 150 quid. If it goes wrong, you sort of bin it and get another one, and you can kind of machine wash them. And there was this, dry cleaning became this, it went from like a necessity business to a luxury business. So that's kind of not exactly the same, but it's kind of similar to what's happened in the pub business, hasn't it? Because you were sort of, I know they've got outside gardens now, but so is that when you exited?
Yeah, so I mean, just picking up on that point, you know, like any change, people are always fearful of change. But, something that my dad taught me was always embrace your change, because there's always opportunity in change as well. So, like where we didn't pivot from a wet-led pub to a food-led pub, if we were quick enough, got educated ourselves at that point, we could have maybe shifted the business a different way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the time, I look back now into the dry clean, and I think that's what we should have done at the time. We should have gone and done lots of shirts, 5 shirts for 10 quid, iron, and done home collection, and gone into wedding dresses and duvets and blankets and the things that people still wanted done, rather than just focusing on what a traditional dry cleaner was.
So change forces you to think outside the box, right? And like just going back to the pub and sort of where it pushed me into property was when we actually paused for a minute and said, look, what can we do to keep ourselves above water, what can we do? And we thought, hang on a minute, what's keeping us above water is renting the rooms that we're not using on the uppers, because it was keeping our overheads ticking over, so we didn't lay any staff off. We could still pay the electric and the gas and the business rates and everything else at that point. And all the rest of anything we did was cream, and that's when I had this light bulb moment. I was like, I remember my dad was banging on at me saying, look, you're 21, invest in property. You've got a cracking business here. Now use the funds that you've got there to do something else with, like buy investment property. At that age, when you're like 21, 22, 23, you think you know everything. But we were too busy buying, well, I don't say we, I mean, my business partner, we were buying the nice cars, and the Bentleys were coming out, and the Mercedes were coming out, all these sorts of things, and we didn't really think about the future too much. But that time period really made us change our view, and that's when I got involved in property. So in 2008, I bought my first one, and then
first investment property.
Yeah, it was just a 2-up, 2-down in Gillingham.
Quite a good timing to buy 2008, isn't it? Because you're just after the financial crash.
Well, it was
2007, 2008, and then it was more 2009 was the optimum time, was it? Or?
It was during, and I remember buying this property. It was a direct to vendor, and because I knew the person that was selling it, they were a regular in our pub, as it goes.
Oh, right.
But I didn't know it was called direct to vendor at that time. I didn't know anything at that time. I was just sort of learning. And I remember buying it, and I picked it up. So my first property I picked up for £76,500. I remember back then, I think Rightmove had just launched what properties were bought for before that.
Right.
And when I searched on it, the owner had bought it for 108,000. I was thinking, why is he selling it to me for 76.5? Well, no one was buying at that time. Nobody.
There was a lot of issues with financing properties at that time. The liquidity had kind of gone from the market, hadn't it? So
nothing was going on. I was literally we at that point we had 2 pubs. I had one on Gillingham High Street, and we had one down on the river in Chatham, and it was literally just around the corner from the one in Gillingham High Street. And at that point, I couldn't understand. I mean, it was a bit of a challenge to get the mortgage. I must admit, but I didn't know any different at that time. And when I bought it, it was fine. It was, I think it was like a 15% deposit down for buy-to-lets at that, or 10%, I can't remember exactly. And I just remember going there, and whenever I had time off, and bearing in mind back then I used to work 6.5 days a week because it was my own business. So I've never been a 9 to 5. It's been like 9 to whenever you finish,
Until you drop.
And I was just married at that time as well, and bless my wife, she put up with all this working late, and sort of, the government then had relaxed the licensing laws so that you could open till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, or 3 o'clock in the morning. And my business partner kept applying for, if there was like a 1 o'clock extension, he would apply for it. And then at 2 o'clock, and at 3 o'clock, I drew the line. I was like, look, Sid, at 2 in the morning, I'm going home. You want to stay from 2 to 3, go. But I learned a lot of discipline in that, because if we said we were open till 3, we didn't close at 10 to 3. We stayed open till 3. And if we had customers there, we would make sure that they had finished their experience before we closed the shut the lights or swept up around or anything else. Because that's how you build goodwill, isn't it? And that's sort of character building. That's where that no BS or direct approach comes from, is that having those values. And I think they're a bit old school values, which I like them values. They've worked.
Absolutely. I can see quite a lot of that in the Kent property meet, actually, those values. So you've bought this property, 76,500 in Gillingham.
In Gillingham, yeah.
Just around the corner from the business.
Yeah.
It's direct to the vendor. You don't know about that at the time. But what happens then from there?
So I spent evenings, days, weekends, as much as I could, just sort of learning how to refurb it. And I did a lot of work myself. And YouTube was just the thing back then. So I didn't know how to take skirting boards off, for example, and I'd go on YouTube and go, how do you do this? How do you do it? Yeah. And I was just doing a lot of the work myself. And I thought, this is a bad use of my time. How do I didn't know about builders and electricians and plumbers and, well, I knew about them, but I didn't know sort of when to program them into the works. And I just learned on that job, but I learned slowly, I did everything like as an experience. So right, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. And I brought it up to good specification. I got it revalued, and it was valued at about 90 something at that time, 95-ish. So I thought, oh, that's not bad. I've done most of the work myself in my spare time. Put it out on rent, got a bit of got rental coming in. And I thought, oh, brilliant, And then it literally started on from there. And then at that point, the second pub that we had, I was going to sell that because after the smoking ban, I thought we'd just consolidate down to one and build the war chest back up of cash, so we get rid of it. But the brewery at that point was doing like a disposal on their sites, and money was tight back then, and I knew what we were doing in that business. But I had the opportunity of buying it, but they didn't give me the first refusal. They put it straight in the auction.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I couldn't raise the finance in time. Because the bank said to me that, look, the auctioneer wanted everything done within 4 weeks. The bank said they could do everything for me because I had a trading history with them within 8 weeks. I went back to the auctioneer and they said, look, maximum we can go because it's you and you're already in situ in the property is 6 weeks. But the bank just couldn't do it at that point. So I had to just let it go, and move back to the existing property. And that's when I was firm in my mind that I'm just going to go into property now.
Yeah.
And that was it. Never looked back since.
So I know you mentioned, like, obviously your dad was a big influence in wanting you to buy property. And, I think it's a similar thing for me, actually. My dad has always been a thing that he said to me, bricks and mortar, even my granddad, actually. But what was would you say it's like an element of sort of being fed up of being in the pub business? Or was it just something, a passion within you? What's the reason? Because let's be honest, right? It's not just you're in property in a small scale. You're in property. You're also hosting a property meet full of all these other wonderful people. So you're passionate about it. What was the spark in you to really go from one house in Gillingham to grow a property portfolio?
Good question. I've got to think back on that one. There were so many things happening at that time, Omar. It's not just one thing. It's a combination. When I had eventually sold the pubs, I spent about a year at home, year and a bit at home. My wife was getting fed up with me. She was like, "Look, you need to do something." And I hadn't bought any more properties at that point. And then I went out and I got a job, and I thought I'd go and work for some wealthy individuals, which I did do. I went into the hospitality sector, went into hotels,
right,
and I worked for some really incredible people, that were ultra high net worth individuals. And I was speaking with the directors of those businesses, and I sort of got a flavour of how they're running their businesses. They're buying assets. And then they're getting people to run them for them. And these assets are hotels. What are properties? Same thing, isn't it? You're buying an asset and someone else is paying for that facility, to use that facility while you own the asset. So after a bit of time there, I just thought, right, I'm going to go into it full time now and go for it. And the reason why my dad was saying is as a young man, when I was about 2 or 3 years old, I was born in Kent. My father and my family, we moved up to Scotland because an opportunity came where my dad could buy a shop because his uncle was already up there. And he said to my dad, "Look, Matt, come over to Scotland. There's some really good opportunities here for you." And what my mum and dad did was they'd bought like a corner news agents, set it all up, new shelves, till, made the shop more welcoming. And again, down to goodwill and being a people person like I was in the pub trade. You build goodwill by talking to your customers, giving them a good service. If somebody wants a certain paper, whatever, you've got it reserved for them. And my mum and dad grew that business, and they ended up buying other businesses at the same time. So if there was a parade of shops, they'd end up buying almost the whole parade. So one was like the newsagents, one would be the spa shop, one would be the candy store.
Wow.
And then my dad was setting businesses up like back when videos were a big thing. You'd pay like £10 to be a member, and £1.50 or whatever it is to rent a videotape back then. This was before Blockbusters, by the way.
Yeah.
And then he got a fleet of cars and started a car hire business.
So what I'm gathering here is that the entrepreneurial person, it's definitely a generation before
100%.
you. You've obviously grown and taken this on, but your dad was very entrepreneurial.
My mum and dad were they were like the A team. My parents. My mum did a lot of the hard work, sort of the day to day. But my dad really set things up, and then was always looking for the future, So I saw the hustle, I was always living in a council house, at that point in like one of the roughest council estates in the middle of Scotland, and it wasn't even a house, it was a flat on the ground floor. We'd have our windows panned in because we'd be the only Indians in the whole council estate at that time. So we've seen it. It was rough back then, But as kids, you didn't understand. And then, I saw through hard work and persistence that we moved from there to an all right house. And I remember my dad buying his first BMW back in the day. And that was like a massive thing. Where we lived, nobody had a BMW. My dad didn't even drive it. He bought it and it stayed in the garage. And he sold it very quickly because back then you could buy a house for the same money as a BMW.
Wow.
So he was always buying assets. But we were very lucky that we had a lot of time to spend as a family, so we enjoyed the journey, not just the destination.
Yeah. So there's a lot of businesses being set up, and the kind of investing in assets cultures embedded in you from a young age. But then you ventured out of pubs. And you're now starting to think, right, I want to go into property. You've bought your first house. You've made some money there, but you've got some rental income coming in. So from there, where did you go?
So when I went into property full time was actually again through an acquisition that my parents had made. So they bought a block with 2 shops and residential above. And my dad's business model was always buy a business with oppers. We'll live in the oppers. And he would quickly make a property unencumbered because he wasn't paying a second mortgage. Because we lived above it, And my mum was running the business. And this was done a few times. And at that point, we had I can't remember if it was a 4 or 5 bedroom. It was like a 4/5 bedroom flat above both the shops. We had a huge car park on the side and triple garages at the back. And when my parents leased the property, so the buyer, even the stuff in Scotland, for example, would buy it, then lease it to somebody. So they've always got the asset, and we've still got it to this day. When we had decided to move, once the shops were let, we wasn't sure what to do with this huge flat. It was massive, it was like a 5-bedroom flat. With a living room, kitchen, storage area, triple garages. What do you do with it? And the estate agents in the area didn't even know what to do with it. They were like, split it into 2 and we'll get 2, maybe 3-bedroom flats. And then I came across these training courses. And I was like, right, let's look at sort of, what you could do off the high street, we got the opinion from the main estate agents. Then I went to a couple of these training courses. So
it's property education of some sort.
Yeah, property education. I didn't buy anything.
No.
And I've got an opinion on that now. That I'm sort of 15 years beyond that now. But maybe I should have done something at a point. But I did it the long and hard way. So I put the hard work in. I read all the books. I followed a few people back then because Facebook was up and coming and social media and other bits and bobs. I thought, right, what's this HMO business all about? Eventually, I turned that place into our first 8-bedroom HMO. So rather than renting the property out at, say, £1,500 a month, we're getting now £5,000 a month, which is a big difference.
Yeah, huge difference.
Yeah, and that's really what kick-started me into the HMO and title split strategies and other things that I've done to this date.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because when I think of you, and I know you're one of your business partners, Francisco, as well, I've spoken to at length, but I always think of you as doing the product, the high-end HMO. Like I've seen some of your rooms, and they're, I mean, like, because there's HMOs and then there's HMOs.
We call them suites, not rooms.
Suites or micro studios, as people are. But yours are, they're all singing, all dancing, kitted out to the max, you know, paneling and lighting and like really thought through really well. And the spaces that are being created are, you know, I'd be very happy to live in any of them, you know. So when you first started in HMOs, was that a concept that you thought about? Were they basic to start with, and how has that sort of evolved?
Yeah, I mean, the first one, our old house, it was just like a basic. I'd done a course. I actually did do a course in the end, and it was just like, you know, furniture package. It wasn't even en suites at that time, but it was new carpets, paint on the walls. And that was it. You know, there was enough storage in the kitchen, and we were just thinking about the rent. But, you know, I then changed because again, coming back to running businesses, the customer, we're there to serve our customers, right? And it's about doing business with people. So you're building a community, aren't you, really? And that's how you build goodwill, because people don't leave you once you're in a community. You know, very, very rare you get turnover. I thought, right, what can we do? How can we add value to this experience? And it's all about creating a lovely environment like this studio here is fantastic. You know, why would you want to move if you're in a fantastic environment?
You're right.
And the reason why I've done that is also my experience about working in the hotels. You know, I remember my boss at that time, he had the option of either going one of these franchise hotels or keeping it independent. And he decided to keep it independent, but upgrade the rooms so he was the highest level in that area. You know, this is around Bayswater, Paddington Hyde Park area. And the product was just amazing. You'd walk round, and there were other hoteliers around franchise hotels in that area. They would come and have a look at our product. And they were like club rooms. You know, club rooms weren't even a thing back then. So you got your standard suites, you got your junior room or your junior suites, then you got your club rooms. And for the extra money he was getting for the club rooms versus what he'd spent on the upgrade, which was just furnishings, I thought, wow, it's a
no-brainer, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. So essentially, that's the reason that you call your HMO rooms suites, because you were previously in the hotel business, and it's come from there. But so it's a premium product. It didn't start off like that, but it's absolutely evolved into a premium product. And is that the main focus for you then? Is it just growing a HMO portfolio, or do you do some other stuff in property as well?
You know, as a uneducated investor, my journey has been single lets to HMOs to new build, and then now I'm doing flat developments or developments. You know, single lets and HMOs, they have a place in your journey, or in my journey, they've had a place. So it's not the be all or end all. It's just part of the mix of property investments that I have. You know, and I know why I'm doing it now. You know, people talk about the why. Why are you doing this? You know, I have a why. It's very personal to me, and it's very personal to my family.
Do you think that's something important for people that are in or want to get into property, that they actually have that reason why they're doing it? Is it a necessity to have a why? Or,
you know, at the beginning, I didn't know what this whole why business was. Like, what do I want to do property for? You know, but as you're sort of growing into things and doing stuff, everything just makes sense now. You know, Henry Ford once said, "You're right if you can, or you're right if you can't." But I just get it. I know why I'm doing it. I don't ever want to be super wealthy or anything like that. I'm very comfortable right now. You know, I'm very comfortable. And what am I going to do with the money anyway? I've got my time back, Omar, you know, and that's what I appreciate more than anything. I've managed to get my wife out of work, and, you know, she's like joining me in the business as well.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, it really is. It's a big help. You know, so we've got two fingers on the pulse now rather than just one.
Absolutely. I wonder what the dynamics are like with that, because I'm trying to think whether I would have my wife working in my business. But there we go. That's a story for another day, I think. Jazz, let me talk about property education with you a little bit. This is a, and I'm especially thinking about this for the people that are watching this podcast, because there'll be people watching now that will either be brand new and thinking, what's this property business about? Is it worth diversifying? Is it worth doing this? And there'll be other people that are perhaps much further along in their journey, and they've actually gone and done some decent things in property, and there'll be people maybe somewhere in between. But when I really want to get your opinion on this, and I don't want to influence you in any way, because I have my own opinions about property education.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me about that? I know you said you've touched it a little bit, but what are your thoughts on property education businesses in general? Again,
everything has a place, and property education, I don't have a good or a bad thing to say about it. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to find something, or trying to find a solution to somewhere, a shortcut would be just to go on one of these courses and then figure it out, right? Now, this is why I set the Kent Property Meet up with Chrissy, is because I've done a few courses. I haven't done many. I think I've done maybe 3 or 4, and they've sort of sharpened my knowledge in that particular sector. And then the rest of it has been hard work, which nobody wants to do, Omar. You know, hard work being you have to educate yourself. Really, you've got to read the books. You've got to follow people that are doing stuff ahead of you. You know, and how are you going to meet these people? You're going to meet them if you network, right? So all we've done with the Kent Property Meet is we've created this environment of people like yourself, that are walking the walk, talking the talk, and what I found is the more successful people are, the more they're willing to share. So I think the education space, yes, is definitely worth doing it. And I wish that I'd maybe invested in the education just slightly earlier, not going in too deep. But what I'd done was enough, was just like, for example, I did a rent-to-rent course, but I've got no rent-to-rents. I did that because it was specific to HMOs, and I wanted to learn about HMOs. So it was like a day or two. Did that. I didn't do any mentorship or anything like that at the beginning. Perhaps now I should have, even if it was 6 months or 12 months. But I created the Kent Property Meet with Chrissy to create that environment and become friends with people. Again, bringing the whole goodwill thing back. There's people in our group, as you know, Omar, that are doing mega stuff. We've got some ultra high net worth individuals there with over 250 properties in our group.
It's inspiring, actually.
It is, and they're so humble. But if you ask anyone anything, they're always willing to share. So education definitely plays a role. Would I spend thousands and thousands and thousands on a course or mentorship?
Okay, let me ask you another question then. And I think it's a really honest answer from you, and it's intriguing to know your thoughts. But how does one go about finding the right property education compared to some of the stuff out there which really isn't worth the £20,000?
I think word of mouth, Omar. Is that yes, relationships is like, if you're trying to find if you're trying to fill a niche or a gap in your education, go and network with these people. They're always about. I know you do a HMO workshop, and it's fantastic from the feedback that come out. I actually enrolled my wife onto a course just a little while back, because rather than me explaining to her, I would rather just pay someone and say, look, bring her up to speed where I am, and then let's go. So there is places for it.
Yeah. So any red flags, and we'll round this topic off in a second. But so word of mouth, these one-day workshops, seminars from people that are in the business, perhaps they know what they're doing. And there's absolutely some fantastic stuff out there people can do. I think also things like this, podcasts, free or light cost property networking events. There's some stuff on YouTube as well, which is pretty good from certain people. But are there any red flags that you would say for people that are in that perhaps should think twice about taking that step into property education?
I'm probably not the best qualified to answer that, but I'll give you my opinion on it. There's social media stars all over the place. I'm not really a social media person either.
You're a bit off the radar.
Not off the radar. I've got a young family like you, Omar. I'm limited with time, to do things, I don't know. I can't really answer that question, to be honest. But just do some due diligence on the people that you're going to choose to follow, or you're going to choose to take advice from. Make sure they're walking the walk, I remember, and this is a bit of a plug for you, actually. You probably didn't expect this, but I'm going to want 20 quid from you in a minute.
I'll sort you out after.
The time that you did your talk on the auction stuff, I literally took pages of notes.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did, honestly. And, we've got a surveyor in our group,
Graham,
who's like he's a walking oracle of anything to do with property.
The rocket scientist of surveying and EPCs and all that sort of stuff.
Of anything, he's got so many letters after his name. But he was sat next to me that day, and he took more notes than I did. So if you were doing an auction thing, would I come to it? 100%. This is why I can plug your HMO stuff, because
that's kind.
Because I know you're walking the walk. You've got your proof out there. We know you're running a successful brokerage as well. So it's people like you, Omar, that I would encourage to say, look, go and follow these. The red flag stuff, just leave to a side for now, but follow the people that are actually doing.
I think that's really good advice. And I only say that actually, so I'll just delve slightly into my experience without taking too much time on it. But I actually was in property before I found property education, right? And I just knew it my way, because I started off as a mortgage broker in an estate agent.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky because I was kind of eager, and the chap who run the business, if he's watching, is a boy called a man called Ben Harrington, estate agent at the time. And I remember saying to him, Ben, I really want to buy my first property. Can you try and find me something? And he was, looking at properties, and this property came up in Welling. It's the first property I ever bought, and it was a rundown wreck of a house. And it was kind of him that actually inspired me to get my first property. Without doing any property education, I was just in that. You're in an estate agent, you're seeing people buy properties all the time. You're thinking, right, people are creating wealth here.
Yeah.
Let me have a bit of this, And that's kind of the first step that I went on. And I just found at the very beginning, my journey was quite slow. I was like, where's the next? How do I, am I going to be working in this 9-to-5 job and doing Saturdays for the rest of my life, and then going home and helping my parents in the dry cleaners, and like, when's my time? And I was kind of, been working since the age of 14, 2 jobs, paper round, mum and dad's dry cleaners, in the off license, and then getting home to make sure I cleaned the house before dad got in, and all sorts. It was just relentless. But I stumbled across an advert which said free property education. And I think it had a picture of someone famous on the advert. I won't say who it is. And I thought, do you know what? Let me go. And that was the time where, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, but I actually ended up going to one of these seminars, which was very much a hard sale, neuro-linguistic programming type event, where they had people in the room that were running to the back of the room that worked for this company and created all this high emotion. You need to sign up to these courses right now. And there was something in me that actually didn't do that. But it's very strange, because it actually sparked this thing in me where I left and went back and slagged the event off completely to my wife, saying, I can't believe this happens, but I've got to do it. Yeah. And I didn't pay for any courses or mentoring, but it made me change my sort of trajectory on how I wanted to shift from, the whole thing about getting your time back, right? A lot of people go and they read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all of a sudden they're a property entrepreneur, right? Yeah. And this company that I initially got in with, there's a lot of bad press about them for the one day thing. But I do think that day actually sparked something in me. And so I sort of encourage people to go and find their own way in life.
But Omar, like what you said, the whole, like you and me, we come from a business background as well, We don't like being sold like that. Because I think
that's the problem.
If they did that without the whole run to the back of the room business they'd probably, I don't know, but they've probably got stats on it. But I would have preferred them to just sell it to me like as a sensible person.
Absolutely, you would have bought that, wouldn't you?
Rather than sort of, having no dignity and running to the back of the room because you're like, who's going to run first? Make sure I'm the second or third. I don't want to be the first one up there.
Absolutely.
But, like if it was a bit more of a sensible approach, like a gentleman-y thing, I think, it would suit.
And there are absolutely some people now that they run legitimate, they're super knowledgeable people. And if you get into their mentoring, training programs and things, you can excel. And I definitely think it's a great thing. It's just doing the due diligence on it, isn't it? And so that leads me slightly on to, if we can talk about the Kent Property Meet, if you're happy to.
My passion.
Yeah. I go to the Kent Property Meet once a month, every month without fail. I meet people that are new and I meet people that have been there every time. Yeah. I get to talk to these people. It costs me negligible amount of money, 20, 25 quid, whatever.
£17.50. We've not put the price up at all.
Right. And I'm inspired.
Yeah.
I've spoken there a few times. I've created friendships from the group.
Yeah.
I've had people who have done something similar to me share their valuation reports for their HMOs with me, and I've given context back. And out of all of the kind of property networking events I've gone to, it's one that I've actually felt like I've almost become part of the family.
Yeah.
It's really strange. Like I genuinely have gone there and feel like I actually fit in here. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Now, how long, because I'm relatively new in the landscape of how long you've been running the Kent Property Meet, but when did you start it? What were your intentions? How have you managed to keep it going for this long? Because, to pull these things off, there's a logistical, it's not like let's just turn up and it's more than that. It's clear. But tell us a bit about it if you can, Jazz.
Chrissy actually was the one that started it first.
Oh,
Chrissy
right.
Kusic is my co-host.
Yeah.
It wasn't called the Kent Property Meet then. It was in a different location and it was called something else. And Chrissy was the second host of this other meet.
I see.
And her co-host at that time decided to pack it in and move away from Kent. And I was like the guy at the front that sort of volunteered and said, I'll do the badges, that sort of thing. And Chrissy just sat down with me one day and said, look, we're going to pack this networking up. And I really enjoyed it because it was that gap between doing a bit of education and, if I spoke to my friends, they're not interested in property.
I was just going to say this.
Yeah.
If I went home and started talking to my wife about the next title split opportunity, the eyes are just glazed over and she's thinking, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I thought this is, for me, this was my once a month where I got, this was like where I got my hit.
Yeah.
Because everyone in there, we could stay. The meet would finish at 10, but I wouldn't come home till midnight, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because we were so engaged in the conversation with each other.
Yeah.
And every time you have a conversation in those groups, you're learning something. You're like, oh, you did this. Where did you get that from? Valuation reports. What did that stack up when you did that? So everyone in there is there for a reason, and all your answers are there in that room. I mean, we've had JVs form in that room.
Yeah.
I met my business partner in that room, and I've done probably over 2 million. I don't know how much it is, in GDP.
Jointly,
jointly together. It's but it's just it's fantastic. That group.
And what's the format then? For someone who's not in the networking scene, and I suppose this is kind of promotional for networking events across the UK.
Absolutely.
There's lots of them, isn't there? You've got Partners in Property and Poppadoms, you name them. There's loads, right? Kent Property Meet is the one I go to geographically. What's the format for someone who's, let's say they've never been or they're in property? Is it for all people? And like, what does the day or the evening look like?
It's for everyone, even if you're scratching the surface and thinking about getting into property. The first event we always do for free anyway is a welcome. Look, come and check it out, because some people might think these networking events are like a cult. They're not. They're there to educate people. Like we have a speaker like yourself talking about auctions and the pitfalls and how to find opportunities. You wouldn't know this if you didn't know you. We have a WhatsApp group now. So, we can just ping you a message, say, Omar, have you got 5 minutes? I just wanted to run something past you rather than forever searching on Google. Let's seek somebody that has the experience. So on the day, if you're nervous, come and see me. Because I remember my first networking event, how nervous I was. And I wanted to speak, but I just didn't have the confidence, because I don't think the host picked me out. But, like we have newbies that come to the meet, and it's all about how we make them feel when we're there. So we're trying to make everyone comfortable, and we're encouraging them to step out of their comfort zone so that they grow. They're there for a reason. They're there because they want to better themselves and they better their life standards, right? Ultimately. And that's going to benefit anyone that's living in their houses, because all you're trying to do is educate yourself to give a better finished product for the end user, isn't it?
For sure, yeah.
So on the day, we sort of do a little networking thing at the beginning where you get your badges and bits. Everyone comes into the room, they sit down, we have a quick welcome. We do like an icebreaker at the beginning, so you meet the people around you first, so that you get comfortable with who's around you. You're not sweating under the pressure of, oh, bloody hell, I'm going to have to stand up and say my name.
And that's kind of optional as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
so people don't have to stand up and speak. They can kind of just...
You don't have to. But with the icebreaker, that's why we do it, Omar, is that it just breaks You know, if you're sat next to 3 or 4 people, it's a lot easier than speaking to a room of 50, 60 people, you know. And I'll come and stand next to you, you know, because I'll walk around the room. I'll say, look, come on, where are you from? What are you doing? You know, why are you here? How can people help you? The minute you stand up, you know, in the next break, you'll have like 5 or 6 people coming saying, oh, you asked about total splits. You know, I've done a couple. You know, they're in Canterbury or wherever. I'll come down, I'll show you around and how we did it, and this is what I used. All of a sudden, you've got your answer.
With property, it's quite it's an unusual thing that people, I don't know if this is just me, but people tend to want to share and they don't really want anything back for it. Like in lots of businesses, I'm trying to think now, if I was in a business and I went to one of my competitors, I know it's not the same, but and sort of said, can you know, educate me on this? They might sort of think, you know, this is a small space. There's enough chimney pots to go around.
Absolutely.
That in these sort of meets, you genuinely say, you know, are you doing a HMO here? I heard you're doing one. I'm trying to do one here. Could I pick your brains? And not only do these people say, yeah, you know, they'll meet you for a coffee. They'll go to lunch with you. They'll show you around their property. And it's like it's just phenomenal that people are that generous with their time, I found. So they come along, they sit down, they get to network, and then you have a number of speakers. Some are kind of like established people that give updates. And then you'll have like 1 or 2 keynotes, right? And these are people that you've selected.
Correct.
There's different themes, isn't there? So sometimes we talk about development, land, HMOs. There's all themes, isn't there? And 12 meetings a year, or we take Christmas off, don't you?
Yeah, we don't do one in Christmas, although we do a social Christmas one. We don't do one in August, but otherwise it's
10.
the 4th Wednesday of every month. We're based down in Maidstone.
So the cheapest form of property education you'll ever get, 175 quid for 10. Actually, cheaper because you get the first one for free.
Free, that's right.
But it's actually nothing to do with the cost.
No.
It's actually the people you meet, the connections you make, and the learning you take in. So just thinking about the surveyor that you mentioned, Graham, who is one of the regular speakers there. And, you know, I've been around property for a while now. I'm still learning every single day. I'm happy to say that, you know, I don't know it all. I very much is a daily learning curve for me. At the last meet, I had the privilege of having a bit of time with Graham. He's picking my brains on a couple of things. I'm picking his. There was a conversation where he virtually saved me about £20,000 on something that I don't know why, but I was just completely dismissing this idea. And he just, you know, you just need to run something past someone and they look at it and they say, why are you thinking about it like that? Like I did it like this. And I'm like, Graham, you've just saved me 20 grand. It was literally that is what happened to me at the last meeting. So, you know, I couldn't really recommend it enough. I've got no shareholding in the Kent Property Meet. I'm not affiliated anywhere. I just absolutely think it's a place to, and, you know, there's probably many others across the country as well that do something similar. But for anyone who's like thinking what to do, they're not, like you said, these scary places, and there's plenty of networking opportunities at them. So Jazz, that's enough about the Kent Property Meet. I'll stick a link in the show notes for people that want to go there and then get their tickets on Eventbrite and stuff. But and you'll see us both there if you come along. Could you? I've seen a few posts with you with hard hats on and the high vis and all that. Is there anything you're focusing on or doing right now?
So in the last 3 odd years, I've managed to build our own build team with Francisco. So we've set our own development company up where we employ our own guys. The reason why we've done that is, you know, we have a volume of properties now. So if ever there's a problem, within 24, 48 hours it's dealt with. It doesn't matter what it is, you know. And the idea now is just to have enough volume of property coming in so that we've got, you know, a project ready for the guys. At the moment, we're working on 2 live projects, and I've got 2 more in the background. So the 2 at the moment are a 7-bed sui generis HMO in Maidstone, and we've got a C4 conversion to do near Bluewater. And then I've got a development of 6 flats, which I'm actually pricing up at the moment and choosing whether this is above a commercial. So it's one of our legacy stock from my parents. And thinking about either a timber frame construction or traditional block and beam and build. And then I've got another one of 9 flats, which I scale down from 14 because it hits the social
affordable
housing. And plus, I lost my planning appeal on that as well. So I'm always trying to push the boundary on what we can and can't do.
Yeah.
And then after I've done those, I think I'm going to take maybe a 6 month or 1 year break.
I was just about to say you're going to have a holiday after that. I think.
Yeah, no, it's not so much about the holiday. I think it's about retraining, because at that point, I think you're going to have more. You'll probably make more in tax savings, and strategizing the business before you go forward again. And then it gives you a chance to build that war chest back up, because in any business, cash is king, right?
Yeah.
So you always have to make sure that you've got enough backup. And I don't want to be like the first property that I bought. Remember, I bought that from a vendor who bought it for 108 and had to sell it at 76,500. And I don't ever want to be in that position.
Yeah.
So not to over leverage and start bringing the leverage down on the portfolio. And where my wife's joining the business as well now, joined the business, you start using her skills from a banking background and professionalizing the business even more before we go again.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot that I want to do, but at every juncture, you're right if you do, and you're right if you don't, So like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And it's all about being more professional now, especially with the renters' rights bill now.
Oh, yeah.
So you really have to watch and wait what's going to happen with that. So
there's no space to not be professional as a landlord.
Absolutely not. You need to know where all the pitfalls are and the drawbacks and where the opportunities are as well in the same hand. So I think it's time to just reflect. Because the government don't even know what's going on with their own bill at the moment. So when it's out, we'll have a look, and then maybe we pivot slightly. I'm loaded up with residential properties. I would like to look at commercial as well for obvious reasons. Start looking at, as we're getting older in life, how can we use pensions? I've just set a pension up. I'm in my 40s now. I should have maybe done it 15, 20 years ago. So it's all about sort of re-educating yourself.
For sure.
and speaking to those people in the networking events that are slightly older than you, that have a bit more experience, and saying, look, what would you have done different at that time? So I'm going to take that time to just pause and then go forward again.
Really interesting, actually. One of the things I've been thinking about for years is property seems to be, you've done one deal, you're on to the next, you're on to the next, you're on to the next, you're looking for the next, you've refinanced. It seems to be this whirlwind of creating a business. Yeah. And then, maybe it's just me. Some people find it difficult to actually let me step back for a second and just look at what I'm doing, and am I on the right trajectory of where I want to go, or do I need to pivot and, like you said, maybe open a SAS or a SIP and start doing this? And so there's really a need for certain people, especially when you get to levels like where you are in your life and you've built the foundations are very solid, and you need to work out what suits you. Like if someone said to you now, Jazz, why don't you go full steam into SA and start running an Airbnb business? You might go, no thanks, I've had enough. I don't want all the stress. So it's just kind of really knowing where you want to go in the future. Could I ask, let's say there's someone watching this now, listening on a podcast or even, and they're thinking, let's say they're in a decent job, okay, got some income coming in, and they're intrigued about property, and they're thinking, what do I do, and how do I start to do my first property deal? What would be your recommendation on that? What would you, I know there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of hurdles to overcome, but what would be your thing to say, do this first?
I would definitely say to whoever that person is go and speak to some people that were in the same position as you, or are in the same position as you, and what they've done and what worked, what didn't work. So get feedback from people that are actually doing it. Where are you going to meet these people at events, property events?
Absolutely.
At our events, we get doctors that are working in the local hospital. And why are they there? They're there because they want to JV with people that have time. They have the money. Sounds like this avatar that you've just mentioned. They're in a good job. Why do they want to do they want to buy something hands off, give it to an agent? But bearing in mind they're going to have to be responsible for that property because of the new regulations coming in, how are they going to bring themselves up to speed for that? So it's just about talking to people, you know, and sort of finding the solution in the right environment, you know.
And then picking and knowing what you want to do, isn't it? It's like sort of saying, right, so you don't just jump into something without knowing. You decide, are you going to flip a property and make a bit of cash? Are you going to do a buy-to-let and try and refinance it? Are you intrigued about HMOs? Until you fully understand these things, you can't make an educated decision, can you? So it's knowing. I think that's a really good tip. So you're saying speak to someone who's done it and walk the walk.
Yeah,
and
I think, you know, reflecting back on all those years of my first property, you know, bearing in mind, but back then you could buy in your personal name. There wasn't any Section 24 clause or anything like that. You know,
the good old days.
The good old days. Yeah, I would definitely get advice on any business you're going to start now and getting the structure right at the beginning. You know, because a lot of people are buying SPVs now, special purpose vehicles, but how is that held? Is it held in a holding company and split down in a layered structure? How does that affect your finance? So, you know, it's definitely worth speaking to, maybe not, accountants are fine, but maybe speaking to a tax specialist to speak to sort all your format out, because that person might think, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to buy a mutual fund and not get involved with property, you know, or just invest it in the S&P 500 with a wealth manager, or whatever it might be, because why are you doing it? It goes back to that why thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Do you want to earn $5,000 a month, 10 grand a month, 15 grand a month?
Yeah.
Why?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's really, really good advice. Jazz, it's been inspiring having you here. I've wanted to just sort of grill you on things and talk to you. We always chat about stuff, but just to get to know you a bit better. And I really feel like we've managed to do that today. I'd love to have you back on the podcast. Maybe we could catch up again in a year and see how you're getting on. And I think I'm talking at the Kent Property Meet in July. I'm not sure. I'll check with Chrissy. She asked me to do another talk with an auctioneer who's coming there as well.
Brilliant.
And we're going to do some stuff on that. So maybe anyone who comes along will see us there again.
Yeah.
I normally try to finish the podcast on a recommendation from the guest on something. So this could be a book that inspired you at some point in your life.
I've got a brilliant recommendation.
It's done. Here we go.
Come to the Kent Property Meet on the fourth Wednesday of every month.
So it's the last Wednesday of every month.
Fourth Wednesday. Some months have 5 weeks.
Fourth Wednesday of the month, yeah. And they just get that on Eventbrite.
Yeah, just on Eventbrite. We're not great on social media, you know, but I'm a bit of a dinosaur on that sort of thing. But,
you know, that just highlights things, doesn't it? You know, when people are so organised and everything's done a way, this is like it's not like that. Sometimes it's like a week before the event gets put on Eventbrite, and then it just... You know, you get 100 people come down or 50 people come down, and some of them you've never met before. Well,
look, if there's anyone in your network, you know, we have a private WhatsApp group.
Yes.
And I try only adding people in that group that have actually attended, so you can put a face to the name. So if anyone wants to come in your network, let me know. We'll add them in and just make sure that they actually attend the property meeting and get some value.
Yes.
I'm happy to do that for your network.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Yeah. Excellent. Guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more, and we'll see you at the next episode.